Now, Maxim, from a business perspective, though, those are metrics that, you're recommending other folks look at. But personally, from a sales marketing perspective, what are the metrics that you are paying attention to? What's like the top one that you're just always kind of like browsing like on a weekly,
Especially
daily
for
basis?
an incubating project.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have several kind of key, I always think about it, right, as a doctor, you're looking at height, weight, blood pressure, heart rate, all these like high level signals that can not necessarily give you diagnostic capability, but they can give you a sense of whether this person is doing well or not. And those metrics for me, like if I take the equivalent, right, my kind of immediate physical exam metrics to check in on things are our Slack growth. So, are we having new developers and new users come into the Slack? That tells me a few good things, right? It means it's discoverable. It means they're engaged enough that they care. And it means that the community itself is growing. And that's kind of a crucial kind of top of funnel thing. I look at things like new contributors, right? Which can tell us whether or not we're being discovered in the right orbits from an open source perspective, and whether or not our documentation, our onboarding, our first issues are good enough that they're, welcoming to new contributors. That's a key thing. I certainly look at kind of retention, right? And figuring out like where are we suddenly losing people's interest or enthusiasm, or where are they dropping off, and figuring out why. And it's not always like a science, right? It's sometimes a bit of detective work. But that kind of retention piece is key, is figuring out like, are you doing the things that kind of keep people interested and excited? And there's a few kind of proxy measures I use for that, sometimes things as simple as like our posts on Slack getting a lot of emoji responses, like our huddles on Zoom, like having good registration levels, or people sharing it on Twitter, like that. Those are good proxy signals for engagement. And then with our power users or enterprise users, like how quickly are they responding to us when we, check in with them? Those kind of things are really key. But I'm in our stage of the game, I'm very focused certainly on kind of like top of funnel things, for lack of less businessy phrases, where it's like, how much visibility are we getting, and how consistently, and how much is that translating into clones? How much is it translating into new Slack users? I used to pay quite close attention to stars, but I think what I've found, which maybe is not such a unique experience, is our growth in the first 4 months really corresponded to the star growth, right? We went from 100 to 1,000 stars on launch week. And then we gradually kept building towards 2,000. And I could say from the outside, from the inside, it felt to me like our growth corresponded to that chart. But since then, our kind of stars have somewhat, plateaued. But the good news is that our growth has like gone on a skyrocket since. And I just think that's an interesting point, which is to say that I'd love for our stars to keep growing, and I'm sure they will. But that it stopped becoming kind of a useful measure around 3 or 4 months in.
Yeah, I think a lot of people start like the ones you get early are the ones who are going to be more looking at code deeply, whereas you might get more users as you go on, because I think that's a misconception that it's not a one-to-one, right? Just because you are a user or you value the product or, the tools doesn't necessarily mean you value them enough to go out and build from source, or maybe even look at the source code. You end up getting 10, 20 times the number of users than you do people who will actually go to the repositories.
Yes.
And I think that that's a really interesting thing. Now, you did bring up that kind of top of funnel, and I want to bring that up because this is an interesting question, and I wasn't going to give Avi the last word here, but I think I'm going to steal from Avi the last word because you brought up the funnel, and I'm curious, when you're talking about that funnel, you're talking about the awareness side, which is great, which is exactly what we're talking about, is the more people in the community, the more potential later on that they become customers, right? I mean, that's bottom line in rough nutshell. But the thing is, it's like lots of people, ? Customers, right? And the question mark that middle section is the one that always gets you, and that's the make or break, right, from a commercial company. And so right now, I'm curious, are there indicators you're looking at right now that are in that kind of question mark phase, which is, like, here's these users. How do I know when they might potentially be ready to be a customer and I should talk to them? Are there things or metrics you're looking at? Are there indicators? Are you using the normal kind of like marketing techniques? So, oh, here we have this, qualified lead, and we're going to score it. And then it eventually becomes an MQL, marketing qualified lead, for those who are listening. And then eventually it will become a sales qualified lead. Are you following that same sort of like classic dynamic, or is it a little different?
So today we're not using that approach for many reasons. I think one of which is also just team size, right? Where
absolutely,
I think as we evolve, that might become necessary. The things that I'm really looking for. So to answer your first question about kind of what are we looking for that indicates whether that kind of like middle of funnel kind of no man's land is being bridged effectively. The things that we're really looking for that I think give us a good indication of that is, are the users really investing in the technology and the platform and finding good questions. So what I mean by that, right, is, if someone's just like found a easy, fast way to deploy it, they haven't really pushed it, and they found some utility in it, they may or may not stay, and it's hard to say whether they will. But where we find the most successful long-term relationships coming is when, they start coming, to the conversations by saying, like, oh, we've already done this, we've already done that. We'd like for it to do this, but haven't figured out how. I think when they've got that engaged with the technology, for us, that's like a almost guarantee that they're going to stick around and be a valuable user. And I think, as kind of a follow-up to that, when they start asking you for specific types of support or customization or something, right? Those then become kind of the stars that form the constellation of the smart monetized strategy, right? Where you can start figuring out like, okay, all these people who are just using it and probably wouldn't want to pay a cent for it, they're not going to ask these challenging questions. They're not going to seek like extra capabilities because they aren't so deeply invested in it. But the conversations where you can tell that they've really started plumbing this into their workflows, and they're trying to figure out how to live with it long term. And the signal for that is that they're figuring out what are the blockers of tomorrow, what are the things we're going to want to extend this to. When you can hunt for those kind of questions, that's how you've certainly succeeded in building a great relationship and a good user. And I think it gives you a good indication that there's going to be opportunity to sell value to them long term, exactly as we talked about, right? Where you're not just taking their money, you're giving them a solution they've asked for, and they'll be happy to pay you for it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great qualitative metric to look at. That I think that the hard questions being asked is a really, really good one. I've never heard it phrased like that before, but it's very apt. Yeah.